Let's just jump right in, shall we? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to decode the hidden financial architecture that has quietly kept the US dollar at the absolute center of the world for the past 50 years. We're talking about a system so deeply ingrained, yet so completely invisible to the average person that once you see how it actually works, well, you're never going to look at global news, energy markets, or international politics the exact same way again.
To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine walking into your local grocery store to buy some basic, everyday necessities. But when you get to the register, the shopkeeper stops you and says, "Sorry, I only accept dollars, no euros, no yen, no gold, just US dollars." It'd be incredibly annoying, right? Well, imagine that shopkeeper represents literally every single oil seller on the entire planet, and the only country legally allowed to print those dollars is America. Now, that's no coincidence. That was a highly calculated plan.
All right, part one, the 1971 gold panic.
So, to understand exactly how this massive global dollar monopoly happened, we actually have to jump back in time to the system that existed before the crisis. You might have heard of it. It was called the Bretton Woods system. Basically, ever since World War II, the US dollar was the absolute most trusted currency in the world. And why was that? Well, because it was responsible. It was literally backed by physical gold. This meant if you were another country holding US dollars, you could technically march right up to the US government and exchange those pieces of paper for actual, heavy, physical gold. It was a tangible, rock-solid guarantee of value.
But you know, that responsible system eventually hit a massive brick wall. In the 1960s, America was spending heavily on things like the Vietnam War and various domestic programs. And to pay for it all, they were printing way more dollars than they actually had gold in their vaults to back up. Essentially, they were bluffing. And eventually, other countries started calling that bluff. In early 1971, France actually started physically putting its gold on ships to move it from New York back to Paris. They just didn't trust the dollar's backing anymore. So feeling totally cornered, President Richard Nixon did something incredibly drastic in August of 1971. He went on national television and completely ended the gold standard. Full stop. The dollar was no longer convertible to gold. So here's the absolute crucial point. Ending the gold standard, yeah, it stopped America's immediate bleeding of gold, but it created a massive, unprecedented geopolitical mystery. Think about it. If the US dollar is no longer backed by shiny physical gold, what on earth actually gives it its value? Why should anyone, anywhere in the world, hold on to US dollars? It's a fantastic question, and the world absolutely needed an answer.
Which brings us to the next part, a secret desert deal.
The wildly audacious answer to that whole geopolitical mystery arrived just a couple of years later. And surprisingly, it wasn't cooked up in some Wall Street boardroom. Nope, it was born out of yet another crippling international crisis. Picture this, it's 1973. Egypt and Syria launched the Yom Kippur War against Israel, and the US decides to step in and provide support to Israel. Well, furious over this American intervention, Saudi Arabia, who is leading the OPEC oil cartel, decides to strike back. They slap a devastating oil embargo directly on the United States. Basically, they completely refuse to sell them a single drop of oil.
And wow, the impact was immediate and it was brutal. Oil prices literally quadrupled overnight. A 4x multiplier, just like that. Imagine the cost of running your car, keeping your business open, or moving goods across the country multiplying by 4 in a matter of days. Americans were suddenly waiting in these hours-long lines just to get a gallon of gas. The whole U.S. economy was in a total chokehold. America was now in very deep trouble on 2 separate fronts. Their currency had lost its gold backing, and their economy was being starved of its basic energy.
Cornered on all sides, the U.S. government knew they had to make a move, and fast. So in 1974, Nixon's Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, hops on a plane and flies straight out to the Saudi Arabian desert to strike a highly secretive, carefully calculated deal with King Faisal. Now, I cannot overstate this. This one meeting would literally reshape the entire modern world.
Let's break down exactly what they agreed upon, because the terms of this transactional masterpiece were, honestly, surprisingly simple. Step 1. Saudi Arabia agrees to sell all of its oil exclusively in US dollars. Step 2. Saudi Arabia takes its surplus profits, these brand new petrodollars, and invests them right back into US Treasury bonds. Basically, they're lending their massive profits back to America. And finally, Step 3. In exchange for this gigantic financial favor, the US provides permanent military protection, a massive security shield, and advanced weapons to the House of Saud.
Now, a one-on-one deal is one thing, right? But the true absolute genius of this arrangement was the domino effect it caused. Saudi Arabia didn't just do this in a vacuum. They turned around and convinced the rest of the OPEC nations to do the exact same thing. Suddenly, almost overnight, every major oil exporter on the planet was pricing their most valuable resource exclusively in US dollars. They fundamentally rewired the entire global economy.
This sets up what we'll call the global dollar machine.
So let's look at the actual mechanics of why this built such an unstoppable force. This pivot completely transformed the very foundation of global finance. Before 1971, you held dollars because they were a direct claim on physical gold. Simple enough. But after 1974, the dollar was suddenly backed by something arguably way more powerful than gold: vital global energy resources and unmatched U.S. military might.
And here, my friends, is exactly how the trap snaps shut. You see, oil isn't just gas for your car. Oil is the base layer of the entire global economy. We're talking shipping, aviation, fertilizers, plastics, the electricity grid, the whole shebang. Because every nation on Earth absolutely needs to import oil just to survive, and because that oil can only be bought using US dollars, well, that means every single country must permanently acquire US dollars just to keep their lights on and their citizens fed. It's brilliant. The dollar literally became the unavoidable oxygen of the global economy.
Now, all this forced global demand grants America a literal superpower. Economists actually refer to it as an exorbitant privilege. And it really is an immense, unmatched macroeconomic benefit. Because everyone, everywhere, constantly needs your currency just to buy their daily energy. Everyone is out there constantly propping up your economy.
Thanks to this petrodollar system, America reaps some truly massive practical benefits. For one, the US can run enormous budget deficits. Why? Because the rest of the world is always standing right there, ready to buy US debt just so they have a place to park those necessary dollars. The US can also print money to solve domestic problems without immediately triggering hyperinflation, because all that newly printed money is just soaked up by the endless global demand. And perhaps most importantly for geopolitics, financial sanctions become a lethal weapon. If the US decides to cut a rival country off from the dollar system, they are essentially cutting off their access to the global economic oxygen supply. It's a real game changer.
All right, let's talk about the next chapter.
Because here's the thing, a geopolitical machine this powerful, one that is this deeply embedded into the fabric of the world, it doesn't exist without severe consequences and fierce modern challengers. Which brings us to a really heavy question I want to leave you with today. What exactly happens to countries that try to step out of line and sell oil in another currency? In the next part of this explainer, we are going to decode the dark side of this arrangement. We'll look at historical examples of leaders who actually challenged the petrodollar, the incredible rise of the BRICS nations attempting to build a parallel system, and what happens to the global balance of power when countries finally dare to bypass the mighty dollar. Until then, keep questioning the obvious, because as you'll see, the truth is always at least one layer deeper.